What did you say about Mike?
Mike Pompeo.
Oh, Pompeo.
His quote is, "We lie, we cheat, we steal." Apparently, it's a quote attributed to him. He's the Secretary of State. He's saying this is a live military exercise. Anyway, this article is about China. Went through it, got it locked down. There's no new cases. They figured out the vitamin C thing. They figured out some other stuff. And they're using our cluelessness and inability to learn from them to run around and say, look, we're competent. Us, Russia, and China are competent.
Right.
We're doing this and we don't have problems. The Western are not, these are not good partners. So they're going into other countries to help them.
Right.
And playing what America used to do to get that.
Well, I mean, America didn't we used to help people? Or have we always only just been bothering people?
We've kind of always been overthrowing governments to get resources from people.
But now, like, places like Korea and China are actually sending their surplus medical
China and
resources.
Russia are sending their resources and their people to say, hey, we're nicer people to steal your resources.
Is that their angle?
Yeah.
Like, we'll actually give you things and not just steal your resources?
Yeah, we'll steal your resources, but in a less way. In a more... since the U.S. has already set up the system, they can come in and be...
Data right error. That's not good.
Oh, wow. What's that mean?
I don't know.
Oh, my God. Are we doomed?
Well, I think it's recording.
Turn it off and on again.
It takes like 5 minutes to turn it off and on again.
Really?
Yeah, but we are live streaming right now. I turned the audio on.
We're live streaming?
Right now, we are.
Shit. Okay. I can say that on live stream. I can't say that on radio.
20:05. That's today. I'm gonna get our tea here.
All right. So welcome to the live stream. We are just starting. Well, this is the warm up. This is the glow plugs heating up the rest of the engine, I guess.
Right, for those of you that understand diesel.
Yeah, for those of you that understand diesel.
I only know that because we've been driving a diesel truck for the past little while, you know?
So we're going to share this. I'm going to share this to my page, and the show will begin in it's time.
We need one of those cutesy little screens that's like, we're getting ready to start soon.
Yeah, we don't have that yet.
Yeah.
You can just hear the rumblings off screen until the show begins.
Right.
Okay, I've shared this to my show, to my line.
It seems like it's recording. I don't know what data right error means. But
Data right, is it still saying the thing?
No, it's not saying it. Maybe it just says that every time and I'm just now seeing it.
You made tea for me?
I did, darling.
Thanks. Alright, so we're gonna have like an intro. It's like a radio intro where we just like the who to the show kind of thing.
Like a special radio specific intro.
Radio specific intro.
Thanks to everybody that's tuning in.
Yeah.
We're gearing up. Bernie Sanders starts his streams 15 minutes before he actually goes live.
Right.
You know?
You gotta populate.
Yeah, he does. He starts his streams. People start blurting out all their opinions. Why don't you guys blurt out all your opinions? You're like, it's those guys again. Oh my gosh.
Somebody did blurt out their opinion.
They're such conspiracy theorists.
They said, what's the spaghetti plate in the middle? What the spaghetti plate in the middle is all about?
Spaghetti plate.
I don't know.
Do we have a spaghetti plate on our table that I don't know about?
No.
We do have a little pile of stuff.
Oh, the box with the things. That's where the microphone is.
Yeah.
It's the microphone for the show. Richard Hammer's watching.
We're trying to find. We have to also record the audio for putting on KBMF. So we do a live stream every Thursday and Sunday from 4 to 6 p.m. And then we edit it and package it and send it to the station manager, and he puts it on KBMF.
You're about to witness that. So now that we've populated with all the most important people, Richard Hammer, Cassie Jangula, and
710 and 805.
805 is tuned in.
Over on Twitch.
Now that all the most important people are here.
That's right. We can start the show.
We can start the show. So now we're going to slip into the professional mode, where we start a radio program as if we were on a radio station.
You just get to see the behind the scenes, not, like Bernie Sanders is just sitting there drinking tea, but you just don't get to watch him,
Right. So, welcome to Post-Orthodoxy. I'm your host, Citizen DJ Dark Sevier.
And I'm Ainsley Sevier, the DJ formerly known as Red-Handed Jill.
Yes.
Back when we could have kids in the radio station.
Right. Welcome to Post-Orthodoxy. It's a show concisely defined as a show about changing your mind.
That's true. Getting out of reality bubbles.
So we started off with the idea of getting out of reality bubbles. What's it like to have to leave a world to find out there may be more than one world?
Maybe the way that you think about everything isn't the only way to think about everything.
Maybe.
I should say, I will categorically say, the way that I think about everything isn't the only perspective on the planet. There are, in fact, about 8 billion other perspectives.
That is a very bold statement.
There are 8 billion other people, and like the olden metaphor of the elephant and the blind men trying to describe the elephant.
From all different positions.
And one blind man grabs the elephant's trunk, and one blind man grabs the elephant's ear, and one blind man grabs the elephant's massive leg. And this is a radio show, okay?
I
know. They're all describing the elephant, but only their perception of the elephant, which is a limited perception.
Limited perception.
We are, unfortunately, in these bodies, limited beings, and as such, we have the unique experience of only having the limited perspective that is available to us because we're stuck in time-space.
Oh.
And can only see with our eyeballs.
Most of the time.
Most of the time. And so that means we also have the unique privilege, if you're interested and you have the energy, of getting to know 8 billion other perspectives. Because everybody has a different one.
There's some I don't recommend. But you got to know that they're there to view before you can reject them.
Yeah, you can't just be like, I just don't want that to be a perspective on the planet.
Right.
Like, it still is.
I'm like that.
You are kind of like that.
I can be like that.
You're kind of like, I just want those people to not actually be real. And it's like, well, they're out there and they're buying groceries and having children.
To be negotiated. Yes, breeding. So today, I encountered a flurry of activity around an article. And it's always nice when an article is printed and there's a flurry of activity around it. That tells me whether it's good or bad. There's something to take a gander at. So I found this article called The Coronation by a writer named Charles Eisenstein. I guess he's a professional essayist. He has a website where he has a list of his essays.
He's been really pushing this essay a lot, though. He has. I was interacting with Charles Eisenstein's friend Lincoln today on Instagram.
Oh, really?
Who's running Charles's social media for him, and I'm like, that'll be the day when I have somebody to run my social media for me.
Right.
Because I spend like a half hour doing posts and setting things up for the live stream before every show, which doesn't seem like a lot, I guess, when you put it in the grand scheme of things of times of our lives. But I was chatting with the Friends of Charles Eisenstein Instagram account, and they've been doing a lot of promotion. They have a lot of
that article.
Of that article in particular. Right. It's the big thing right now. They really want to, kind of like we do. We have a word that we want to get out. And we're trying to get it out.
I'm posting a link to that article in our chat on Facebook.
And
if you're live streaming right now on Facebook, you can see in the comments section a link to the article. It's called The Coronation by Charles Eisenstein.
So for those of you that are going to be listening on the radio, in the future, you can go to charleseisenstein.org.
Yes.
EISEN. So it's like Einstein with an extra EIS on the beginning.
Right.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's his article, The Coronation.
It would be
Einstein. Oh, you're right. Never mind. Forget I even said that. George Giacomini is tuned in. Chrissy Hadley's tuned in. Thanks
I celebrate the effort to have
guys.
done that. Mimetic exercise just doesn't always work out.
It doesn't. No, I was trying to make it relate so people could have a mental hug, but it wasn't working.
So to give people an idea of the show, I want to talk about the coronavirus because there's a lot of people talking about it. However, I always do like to sort of zoom out a little bit and try to get a meta perspective on the things that we get consumed with.
Our tagline today for the show is Kingdom of Fear or Kingdom of Love. And I think that's a good way of kind of bringing everything you're going to be talking about back into that perspective umbrella. Are we making actions?
Binaries are fun.
They're
useful.
They're useful for
easy,
sorting
gigantic
thought processes such as the complete and total overhaul of all the social structures on the planet in the time of the coronavirus.
Right.
It's kind of nice to have we can keep going back to sorting it through those two lenses. Are you and the country in general making choices from the kingdom of love or making choices from the kingdom of fear.
So that's a part of this article, The Coronation by Charles Eisenstein. I came across it. So we've only got 50 minutes left in this hour where we're going to talk about this idea. We're going to talk about this this article, some of the ideas in the article, some of the reactions to the ideas in the article by contemporaries of the writer.
And we might not get through all of it in the first hour, but cold turkey, full stop.
Top of the hour.
At the top of the hour, we're going to do another segment from our interview with Swiss philosopher Hansi Freynacht.
Hansi Freynacht.
Hansi.
Live from the Swiss Alps. Recorded live from the Swiss Alps.
That's right, because it was a really great interview, and we've been dealing with so much of the things that I'm working through in setting boundaries and moving into a healthier space with my family over the past couple of weeks that we keep putting off doing another bit from our Hansi interview.
Also having to move outside of the radio station and learn a whole new live streaming setup here for you folks. Ooh, what's up? Oh,
that's your sound.
All right, so that's so we can do the Hansi Freynacht later. So for the next couple of segments, I'd like to talk about this article and some of the reaction to it. I didn't know you went to the guy's social media thing and started already interacting there.
What are you talking about?
Anxious to find out more.
Oh, yeah. Well, I can't interact with him now because Instagram is only on my phone. You can't do Instagram messaging on laptop, so I hope they tune in.
So what I've discovered here is our friend Hansi Freynacht, friend of the show. We did a nice interview with him. It's about an hour-long interview, which will be made in full soon. But we're chopping it up in bits right now and discussing some morsels. We're gnawing on some morsels, like beef jerky. You gotta sort of like let it soften in there a little bit. Anyway, so we're gonna do that. I follow Hansi Freynacht on Facebook. He seemed to be, he made a point of not making a point about this article. He basically said that he wanted to make a statement about the article and that somebody else had done the statement better than he could, or
he has feelings about it.
He has feelings about it, but somebody else did it good enough.
That's right.
So he linked to an article by Daniel Pinchbeck. Daniel Pinchbeck would be, I guess you would call a public intellectual, a sort of thinker of the alternative left. I don't know what category to put people in. Author, noted author. Daniel Pinchbeck decided to do a response to this article. So I went down the rabbit hole of reading the article, which is not a short article.
No, it took us like an hour.
Yeah, it was a long thing to get through.
So if you want to read it, it goes through a variety of subjects. It's well worth it. Maybe break it up over a few different bathroom trips.
Right, you can do it that way. But I did pull out a few sections that I thought maybe I could just go through a few of the things, some ideas that I thought were salient to my own particular process. What I've been saying on the show, and we've been talking about on the show, is the idea of the coronavirus being a kairos, which is sort of a moment in time where different things may occur or where opportunities occur. And so this kairos of the coronavirus creating as we said last week, it's a portal or it's a hole. You either fall into it or you can go through it to another place.
Depending on your perspective, you see the coronavirus event as a portal to a new beginning or a new realm or another place, or you see it as a hole that you're going to fall into and stress.
Right. So the idea of the kairos in sort of ancient philosophy is the idea of an opportunity. And so things have been shaken up. People are looking at things differently. People are examining their economic system differently. Is my job really that important? There's a lot of things in question. The sort of things have gone up in the air, and are they going to come back down normal?
That's lots of people.
That's the discussion that a lot of people are having. Like, will we get back to normal? Is there a normal to get back to?
Well, some people are just saying, when will it go back to normal? Because their perspective is that it will at some point
go back to normal.
And that's,
of course, it should be.
That's one perspective. And then if you expand from that bubble a little bit, you get the question, will it go back to normal?
And there's a lot of people who aren't very anxious for it to go back to normal.
If
people who weren't having
further,
people who weren't having a good time normally.
I hope it doesn't go back to normal.
I hope it doesn't go back to normal. This is what I've been waiting for.
Was normal good for us?
This is the chaos that I've been preparing my entire life for. You know, we have a very apocalyptic culture, so anytime we can think about getting our go bag and not having to do the office job, that's a big appeal to a number of folks.
Yeah, well, and I have, on the other perspective, I have friends who are really suffering right now because they're not at their job.
Their world's upside down.
They don't know who they are because they've been doing the right thing for so long, doing the next right thing for so long, that they don't know who they are when they get to just be home with themselves. What do they like to do? They haven't been able to do what they like to do since they were a teenager, or even before that. They were never able to do what they like to do. There was never time. It was always school and then a job. And so they're really having this crisis of identity right now because they're suddenly being with themselves, and not everybody has tools to get to know themselves.
Right. It's not always a part of a culture. It's not a part of our culture.
We aren't trained in the U.S. at least to get to know ourselves.
Right. You can buy yourself. You can buy the products that make you a thing,
right,
give you identity. But when you're not out buying
external
products
stuff,
and you don't have people who recognize those neologisms, those sort of like those, I don't know if I use that word correctly, but those icons to say, oh, you wear that shirt and those shoes, therefore you're this kind of person, and we can have this dialogue. But if you dress that way, we can't have this dialogue. I'll have to have another dialogue because you wear that, you know. So, yes, being pulled out of the social context where your identity is often, how much of your identity is who you feel you are and identify with, and how much of your identity is how people ping you back to yourself.
I definitely had that difficult, and to kind of go into this topic today very gently, I had that very, very difficult experience and transition when I finally moved out of the house and got married.
It's a long time to be isolated.
I went from living 24/7. Well, it's the reverse of what you're thinking. I went from living with 10 people 24/7. I was 24/7 always with people.
Right.
To suddenly being home alone for 8 to 10 hours a day while my husband went away to work. And I was just home alone, and I didn't know anyone, and I hadn't ever gone to bars, and I didn't have a college thing.
There was no thread to social.
Yeah, I was just like a bat in a vacuum. Like, you don't know where you are or who you are when you have nothing to ping off of.
That goes back to our discussion from last week about families being cults. So you had a 10-person cult with an extended church cult, which doesn't differ very much in the range of perception of reality. You're not getting a lot of diversified opinions in that zone. And then you're out of that. And that's what the workplace can be for people. The interesting thing about being in a cult, being in a family, a big family, as well, is that people knew you since you were a baby, and then they identify you with your various stages of growth.
They told me who I was.
Right, they told you who you were. And then at one point, you're not who they told you. At one point, the things cohere, and you're more than what you're being defined to be, right? And the parents or the siblings
not handling that part
may not be able to adjust their perception of you from what they saw in the inception to the culmination of various parts that start working as a sovereign entity.
Right. I did finally begin to coalesce about 4 years ago. Well, I mean, obviously it was a process that took more than 4 years, because I had to get before you can begin to become yourself, you have to reach the moment where you realize that you are not yourself. Somebody else is defining you. And it took a very long time before I realized that I was specifically behaving according to the upbringing and the rules that I was given in conservative Christianity, and in homeschooling and in purity culture, and that somewhere in there, like I remember when I was 19, I drew this like therapy drawing. I sat down with my cousin Matt, who's an artist and processes a lot in artwork. And we were just drawing one night, and I was having a lot of emotions, and I drew this therapy drawing of myself, which is a really bad drawing because I'm not an artist, but I was just so driven by all these overwhelming, confusing feelings that I drew the outline of a girl like you would see on the bathroom door, you know, the little, it's just a head and a dress and legs. Yeah. And that was me. And then in the middle of it, I drew this teeny tiny little black outline of a girl. And that was the real me. And it was like the real me was stuck inside this identity that had been given to me. Right. That my only goal in life was to be a wife and mother. And I wasn't supposed to have a career. And I wasn't supposed to have passions outside of something that benefited the church or the elderly or my children.
Breeding more Christians.
So like I couldn't pursue anything I was interested in because pursuing anything outside of Christianity was idolatry, and I didn't identify as much with the identity that I was being given as they wanted me to, and so I felt like this girl, but with a secret girl on the inside that was the actual Ainsley that was just all shriveled up like a raisin person and didn't know what to do. Right. And that was 12 years ago, and so that's been how long the journey has been, was getting to that moment of realization. I'm not. There's the outside me.
The projected on
functioning. There's the functioning Ainsley. Yeah. And then there's my actual feelings on the inside, which I often have been trained to think most of those are sinful. Right. Kira says, you are absolutely right. I myself am at peace, whether I die today or sometime later. To me, it is the satisfying presence of the Lord bringing heaven into my heart in the here and now that gives me such peace.
Very good.
Chrissy says, I believe as scary as all of this is, it's a blessing in disguise. A gift for us to really dig deep and make a shift in our lives and on our internal selves. A sort of wake-up call from the autopilot life we're all living. Yes, and I hope that, maybe Chrissy, in this instance, is coming from a place of abundance in that she is aware now is a good time for self-reflection. And maybe Chrissy even has some tools for self-reflection and getting to know herself. Right. Reach out to your friends. Check in with your friends and ask them how they're doing, because a lot of people don't know how to be alone with themselves and have never been taught how to get to know themselves. And speaking of the Kairos versus Chiron thing, and the portal versus hole in the ground, Green Day says, for me, it feels like I'm on a trampoline that's changing into a black hole. Like I start to feel like this is what is needed to progress as a species, but then I lose the momentum and fall back like it's a black hole sucking me in. And then I bounce back. It's like a perpetual motion machine of the psyche. So kind of being aware of, sometimes you feel really depressed and scared about what does it all mean? Everything's changing. Yes. And then sometimes it feels like, no, everything's changing and we're gonna rocket forward into the new world and it's gonna be great.
I identify with this Charles Eisenstein in the beginning of the story, which I won't read. It's like I said, it's a long thing, and I want to get to a couple of points. So the thing that I identified with in the beginning was him talking about the idea of normalcy or normal being this thing that always feels like ice that might break to certain people. I'm one of those people that always felt like, how are we perpetuating this world this way when it's so unsustainable, unhealthy, blah, blah, blah. But everybody just operates like it's normal. So he describes this idea of always sort of anticipating or hoping there might be this moment of change. This moment where the bullies get their comeuppance and the people who are trapped underground get to come out of the porthole and come up and see the sun, and we actually get to be nice to each other, and the problems to be solved are not problems to be solved because we don't solve them, not because they're not solvable. We don't solve them because of human conflict. We have conflicts about how to go about it. And so there's problems that don't get dealt with.
So let's take like a super simple example. Like one of the things that Charles brought up in his article today, The Coronation, was that there are, 5 million children die every year from hunger? Yeah. And that doesn't even count the several more millions of children that are in starvation mode. Right. That don't have enough. Right. Millions and millions. So it's like tough that 200,000 people might die from coronavirus in the US. Right. But 5 million children die from starvation. And so like there's enough money on the planet and enough food that everybody could have enough money and food. Like, there is no shortage of resources on the planet, but what it comes down to is a disagreement of who deserves to be living healthfully and what you have to do to earn to live healthfully, and how do we get those resources to the people that need it. Capitalism, grr.
It's so in his article he talks about this idea of like there are these other things that are killing people, like depression or suicide. Like there's lots of people dying from other things. More people will die from those other things than this. So what is it about this that has captured everybody?
Right. Why aren't we all hyper-focusing
Right.
on trying to stop childhood hunger?
And in his perception, he breaks it down as we do this because this is where systems of control, which have been developed over time, this is how societies are run, is through systems of control. They've been honed and waiting for an opportunity. And so now the combination of the press and propaganda and the media and the government and corporate agendas have been honing for a long time how do you get a shift in the people? How do you get a shift in consciousness? How do you finally get to leave behind bad systems and find new systems? And that's what capitalism wants to do in a very cynical way, I think, in a lot of ways. They want to, like, the oil economy is, sure, I think even people who are involved in the oil economy know that we could probably be doing something less damaging than that. So how do you shift from that economy to the other economy? There has to be some sort of break or shift where choices have to be made, and we often wait for that. But this is an opportunity, I think, for a lot of systems of control to exert control to facilitate a shift. Which is, I don't feel like is necessarily nefarious, that it can or may not be, but I don't think it necessarily has to be. So this idea that there's, how are different people in the world dealing with this situation? That's the other thing, is we're using it for political folly. Like, so we can now take Bernie and take Joe Biden and figure out who's dealing with the crisis better and just stay in the arena of politics and continue the old battle in the same old arena with the new context. Or you can go beyond that context and say, maybe everybody should retire from this political game because it's hopelessly corrupt, and we need to shake the Etch-a-Sketch and start something new. And there's some smart people in the country that can do that, and we need to come up with some citizen organization that says, okay, you guys, thank you for your service. It's time to do something else. This is an opportunity for something like that to happen. If you are considered, or you consider yourself an agent of the world, an agent of the culture, or if you are just merely consuming the culture and just waiting for the next culture to be delivered. Right now there's people unhappy with what was.
Right.
But have they imagined what could be, and are they working towards what could be, or are they just waiting for the next feature to show on the screen?
For you to be told what your society is, and this is something we've been tossing around with our conversations with Hansi about metamodernism, is instead of postmodernism or previous to that modernism, we have this new concept of metamodernism, where instead of thinking yourself as something that society happens to,
right, victim of the culture, society,
begin to view yourself as society itself. There would be no society without humans. There would be no society without humans. Therefore, the humans are the society. Therefore, you are a part of building that society, and your choices and the people that you interact with are shaping society daily, and your non-choices are also shaping society
daily.
And that has to do with Charles's article, because he's talking about this giant, massive fear of death that we have as humans on the planet, largely in Western cultures, especially in the U.S., because we think of ourselves as alone and separate and single units and a single instance of life not connected to any other instances of life other than that my parents had sex and made me, that we feel terrified about our life ending, because we think of our life as all of life on a primal level without really even spending time thinking about it. Oftentimes humans will think, when I die, that's the end, even though there are many other things will continue in the world. And that the more connected that you feel to the ecosystem of society and to the ecosystem of your family and the ecosystem of the entire story of life, the less fearful it will be for you, this one instance of life that is you, the less scary it will be for that instance of life to pass on into something else.
Yeah. So this piece there's a lot to pull out of it, but I want to start with a paragraph.
So many. It's so good.
I want to start with a paragraph. So this is from the coronation. The paragraph, the first one I pulled out, said, even in diseases like COVID-19, in which we can name a pathogenic virus, matters are not so simple as a war between virus and victim. There's an alternative to the germ theory of disease that holds germs to be part of a larger process. When conditions are right, they multiply in the body, sometimes killing the host, but also potentially improving the conditions that accommodated them to begin with. For example, by cleaning out accumulated toxic debris via mucus discharge, or metaphorically speaking, burning them up with a fever. Sometimes called terrain theory, it says that germs are more a symptom than the cause of a disease. As one meme explains it, your fish is sick. Germ theory is to isolate the fish. Terrain theory is to clean the tank. So
maybe change the thing that made the fish sick.
Right. So there's a lot of, I think there's a lot to learn right now about how different cultures are tackling this problem. Our culture has been, we're a control culture. Like the last sort of event like this in terms of scale in this country was September 11th. And at that moment, people were traumatized. And then the strongman in the form of Bush came out and said, we got this, and we're going to go kick some Muslim butt randomly. And then everybody felt like somebody's in charge and somebody's taking care of this. And then life has never been the same. Airports have changed, security has changed, and if you want to go down the rabbit hole, you know that these systems were set up in place before September 11th ever happened. September 11th was a way to deploy those systems. So right now, there are systems of control, like the idea of being able to monitor everybody's phone and figure out if they are compliant or if they're not, if they're a vector for the disease or if they're not. Your location on your phone. So they can follow your cell phone data. This is the kind of thing that makes, you don't have to be super crazy to start to get paranoid about what the implications of having your data completely open to who? Do you get to choose who the eyes are that are looking at your stuff? Do you get to choose what gets done with that information?
No.
When you live in a cynical, capitalist, us versus them, solo identity society,
well, so many,
it's predatory. It feels predatory.
And so many people are terrified and angry a lot of the time. And they go on Facebook and reshare those things like, I am refusing to give Facebook permission to share my photos. It's my private property. And it's like, the powers that be can do whatever they want.
They can do whatever they want.
And we can react to that knowledge by buckling down and being paranoid and scared, or by just acknowledging that that's the world that we live in, and if you don't want to be tracked, you have to be disconnected from electronics.
Right.
And how can we use that system of availability to our advantage as citizens on the planet?
So while there might be two dialogues, there's a dialogue of like, I'm losing my freedoms, and there's another dialogue of like, this technology can save lives. Like, if you trusted the people who were in charge of tracking the phones to make sure they can figure out the nexus of the virus and how to maybe let a lot of people go outside because the nexus has been contained in this sector, like that would be a great use of this.
You've had a test, you are not positive, you can go outside, and as long as you have your phone with you, we can track your whereabouts, and if you trust the people running the systems of control, then it's very reassuring. And I think the awareness that a lot of U.S. citizens at least have been coming into over the last couple of decades is we can't really trust our government anymore. Maybe our government isn't really doing things for the benefit of the siblings. Yeah, the siblings. The civilians. Big Daddy the government is making choices that benefit somebody else, but it's not what the civilians want.
Yeah, you don't have to call yourself a conspiracy theorist.
That's not rocket science.
That's just evidence. It's evidence to what's going on.
You can just look at water rights. Just spend some time researching water rights.
Or just the last bill. Where did the money go from the last bill?
Yeah.
Like, that gives you an idea where the priorities are with the people that we elected, right? So that's kind of problematic. this idea of the germ being a thing that we are going to gird ourselves, defend ourselves, and fight like a war, versus this idea of this is something in your environment that is reacting to the holism. And it's interesting to see what countries where the virus is going mad and what countries where it's not. And some of that we're not going to know for a year because
testing numbers
of the seasonal changes. So like South Africa is just going into their winter, right? We're coming out of our winter, so we're expecting it to fall. We may be seeing it rise in other parts of the world where they're moving into the darker, damper months. So with that idea of this virus being reflective of a larger condition that we're a part of, it goes further. He wants to go further and talk about DNA. Where's the he would say, I will conclude by invoking one more dimension of the relationship between humans and viruses. Viruses are integral to evolution, not just humans, but all eukaryotes. Viruses can transfer DNA from organism to organism, sometimes inserting it into the germline where it becomes heritable. Known as horizontal gene transfer, this is a primary mechanism for evolution, allowing life to evolve together much faster than is possible through random mutation. As Lynn Margulis once put it, we are our viruses. So the idea that we're going to isolate the virus as like the way we like to isolate ourselves. We're separate from nature, but now nature is fighting us, and an enemy got through nature and got into us, our individual selves. So you're also individuating this virus and not recognizing that this virus is a part of the ecosystem that you are also a part of. And so the idea of trying to keep a virus out by a lockdown world where nobody sees anybody, nobody touches anybody, and you won't get the virus. The other idea is like to clean the fish tank, is like what's going on with our health, with what we're eating, what we're doing, how we're living, that is making this virus so dangerous. And that's the discussion that we're not having. So if you look at what's happening in China, China has figured out a mitigation program, and it's intravenous vitamin C injections, which was told is ridiculous until a couple of weeks ago. China and Russia. For-profit pharmaceutical industries were saying that intense vitamin C injections were ridiculous, despite rampant evidence to the contrary.
So China's figuring out how to do that. They're sharing that with Russia. Now Russia and China are going to other parts of the world that are being hard hit and being the heroes by showing up with the right information, the best way to contain the virus, preventative immuno boosters, so you have a better immune system. And they're allowing, like the U.S., to create their own ridiculous narrative of failure, even though these other two places had track records to show you how to deal with it better. Like South Korea, that to some people would be an Orwellian nightmare. They had tons of testing. They were testing 100,000 people a day. Testing everybody, figuring out who had it, tracking them on their cell phones, tracking their credit card purchases.
Right.
Like
Are
very
you staying home or
Orwellian,
not?
but they're not all on lockdown.
Right.
So it just depends on whether or not you trust the government to do that. So that's what we're looking at. If we're going to go down the control road, then we all have to stay away from each other. Like September 11th changed the way we did things. And I can't help but think the design is for things to not go back to normal. There's already there's new information, there's new psychology, there's new...
Since 9/11?
Since 9/11. There's new technology that allows for new social management. So if you live in the world and you're in a culture or society, you're being managed socially by somebody who's pulling some strings.
Mm-hmm.
I think you'd have to be really naive to think that this is an opportunity for some strings to be pulled, for some new things to be put in place, why everybody is confused. What are we doing? Are we going back to normal? If we don't go back to normal, where are we going? Nobody's acting where we're, I don't see enough people asking where we're going. Like, what could we do with this opportunity?
Mm-hmm.
And as long as we're doing the, I'm afraid for my very one personal monad life, or the one very personal monad life of my grandma, that I will endorse this lockdown thing rather than doing another thing, which is like, maybe I'll just give up some information and you can see where I'm going and I won't spread this virus and I'll take my vitamin C and I won't get sick and my grandma won't get sick. So it doesn't seem like either one of those choices are super attractive if you look at them from the negative perspective. Both of them seem to be attractive. Like, one of them seems to be attractive. The idea that we're just going to be able to isolate and the virus will, as Trump said, like a miracle, just disappear.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're looking through the miracle lens, then yes, it makes sense to go lock yourself down until it goes away. If the premise is it's not going away, and you're just delaying the inevitable, flattening the curve, but delaying the inevitable, what's the next move from everybody quarantining until we make sure the hospitals have the gear they need to take care of the problems as they arise?
Yeah, I definitely think a lot of people are thinking they're very in the present, maybe in a way that they haven't been in a long time. People are very in the present, very much like, we just have to survive the here and now. We just need people to stay home so that someday I can go shopping again, even though I have an autoimmune disease. And that's the story and the hope, the bright light on the hill that people are kind of clinging to.
This guy, Charles Eisenstein, he talks about in the story about the idea of sort of perpetually waiting for the crossroads to appear in culture, where maybe we could choose a healthier turn. And maybe we don't, we stop being empire, or maybe we stop, we treat the planet in a more holistic way versus an ownership way. Maybe this crossroad will come and the majority of the people will endorse the healthy way to go. That's sort of the dream.
Mm-hmm.
And he starts off with the crossroads. At the end, he's talking about the crossroad as like, now there is like a myriad of possible roads to take. And are we exploring them? And if we aren't, why aren't we? And if we are, there's so many of them. How do we agree that we should go take this road because this road is healthier than the road we've been taking? How do you come up with a consensus of where to go?
Well, and I think a lot of, it's kind of hard to have this conversation without having a bit of a sideline conversation into wealth inequality. Like, there are a very, very tiny number of people running the planet as a financial entity. The planet is being run as a business, and the various countries on the planet are operating as different departments in that planetary business.
His quote is, "We lie, we..." Sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. And I think that people that aren't aware of that function are kind of just like, I don't know, depressed. Like, why do, obviously the citizens want certain things and the governments are getting in the way. Why aren't the governments doing what the citizens want? And if you're not aware that above the governments is this business entity that's running the planet, and the country governments are all different departments in the planetary business. And then there are people that are aware of that structure on the planet, and I think it's hard to have this wonderful conversation about what new pathways could we be taking to reorganize society when you're not in control. When you're like, so hecka not in control. It's not just that I vote for someone to represent me in my country's government and then they do whatever they want. It's even worse than that. Like, it's an even worse feeling of powerlessness, an even worse feeling that maybe someday, because of the age of the internet, we'll be able to organize a planetary coup so big, civilians on every continent rising up and deciding that we're all, and somehow agreeing, and somehow networking, and then somehow also overthrowing the business structure that runs the governments of the planet. But it seems a little far-fetched.
Speaking of that, I'm going to put another article that I've only halfway read, that I found it just before this program began. So I got halfway through it before we went live. And I find this an interesting article. It's from a website called Strategic Culture Foundation, and the name of the article is Ground Control to Planet Lockdown.
Ground control to Major Tom.
Ground control to planet lockdown. This is only a test. So this is an article looking at how this circuit breaker is affecting economies and who's taking advantage, who is reeling from the changes, and who is prepared for the changes that can then help define the narrative after, while the people like the U.S. are still reeling. Mm-hmm. We're still like, what's going on? I don't know where our masks are. Do we have any masks? I think did we buy some masks?
He's giving it to China, Canada.
As we're doing this, there are other people like China who's already gone through this that are creating a narrative while we are still chasing one.
We, the U.S.
We, the U.S. Right. Still chasing a narrative about what this is and what this will mean to people.
What does it all mean?
We're starting to have questions about like, okay, what about maybe now that I'm laid off, maybe I don't want my healthcare tied to my employment. Now that we're at an unprecedented millions of people suddenly on unemployment who also don't have insurance now.
Yeah. You're on unemployment, but you don't have...
So that's room for a dialogue. And I don't know if anybody's got the answers to that. I don't know if Bernie's is the answer, but we're having the dialogue about something that's more important now.
Steps in the right direction.
And the same thing about our economy is like, are we okay with letting the Treasury print trillions of dollars and give it to big business that we also support through tax breaks? Like, I think there's some questions, and we'll have some discussions.
Hopefully.
Will we change? Will we be able to mobilize and change our behavior? Mm-hmm. So, to go back to this article where we have this guy, because we only got 15 more minutes before we go to the top of the hour.
Charles Einstein's article?
Charles Eisenstein's.
Einstein, not
yes,
Einstein, right.
Article. And then there was like there was sort of like a critical review from Hansi Freinacht and from Daniel Pinchbeck. And I think his laying out that there's an opportunity here and there's a crossroads and there's things that can happen for people like Hansi, who would like to see a new philosophy take hold in the world, and somebody like Daniel Pinchbeck that would like to do the same thing, that supports things like we have to go after the oil industry and make a concerted effort that people can get together. This is about consensus building and taking action for these guys. Consensus building and taking action in clear, defined ways where I can say, I'm doing a good job because I'm going after the fossil fuel industry, or I'm doing a good job because I am trying to change the dialogue around the social philosophy.
Pods of change.
Right. So, and I think that was the critique against him, was that he wasn't prescribing a course of action for people who haven't figured it out already. These guys tend to be looking at prescribing a course of action or demonstrating a perspective over and over and over until it blossoms in the environment. Mm-hmm. I like the critiques, and I like the article itself. So, anyway, that ate up an hour almost.
Well, you pulled out a couple of other great paragraphs from Charles's article that you wanted to read.
Well, there was one line in particular which, to bring it home here to Butte, America, he says, let's take inventory of our civilization, strip it down to its studs, and see if we can build one more beautiful. We live in a town where there's a lot of post-industrial decay, and the opportunity is there to restore and to make something pretty again, or make it something more than it was. So I found that metaphor interesting because, yes, the dream is to take an old building that is in faded glory and give it new insulation, put some windows that are airtight, tighten it up, and live in there again. Mm-hmm. There's that notion. And then for people who have done that, you can't always tell if the building is worth fixing until you're
in the guts of it.
Until you're $1 million in.
Right.
You don't know that, like, no, this wasn't a good idea. To strip it down to the studs and try it again.
It should have just been destroyed, unfortunately, and start from fresh.
So that's the one thing that I'm not sure. I think that's the sort of optimism that raised some hackles with some critics of his article. For me, it's like, I agree with that, but I also see like some buildings you want to restore and preserve that glory. Some buildings are not worth, like the corruption may be so bad. The corrosion may be so bad. And
Right.
I think that's the crossroads where I'm at in this culture is like, can we continue to use the White House and the Capitol building as the main font of power? Or is there something, is some other power structure have to come up? Does some other civic body have to arise to say, we need to take care of this because they're not taking care of it? That would be the not stripping it to the studs and fixing it.
Right.
That would be the, we need to bulldoze it and start over.
Well, and I think a lot of your arguments with your friends in politics here in Butte is revolves around people who are like, we just need to keep the current system alive long enough to get the bad guys out of power, quote unquote.
Right.
We just have to get the bad. They're fixated on people who they think are the problem. We just need to get the bad guys out of power, and then we can work on fixing the broken system.
Right. So this is the problem which this guy brings up in the article with the virus. So we just have to deal with this virus, right? But then there's going to be another virus. And if you're always just having to deal with a virus, you're not addressing the conditions that make you prey to a virus. And it's just like, if we just have to not be Trump, it just has to not be Bush, it just has to not, as long as they've been doing that, they've been dealing with these little individual viruses and not the environment, which causes us to have to make the choice between the lesser of two evils, decade after decade after decade.
Yeah.
So they're not addressing the root problem. And this is one of those things where I don't know anybody who knows what's going on with the virus. There are some mitigation strategies that are working. There are some people figuring out how to test it. They might be able to come up with some preventative for it. But it's still so new. I don't know anybody who can authoritatively say, this is what the virus is, this is what's going on, this is what's going to happen down the road,
the best
and
way
this is
to
how it's going
prevent
to
it.
affect the economy.
Right.
Or I think it's all kind of open right now. And I haven't heard a narrative yet where there's a lot of really compelling ones, but not that I think can be backed up by data. There's a lot of compelling theories about who we are and where we are and how we got here. So yes, I think what we saw in politics mirrors what we're seeing dealing with this health crisis. We're doing the same things. We're kicking down the road the possibility of a better system while we try to just deal with the crisis in front of us while the old system remains. So
You talk a lot about parallel institutions, and you talked a lot about that before we even started doing these shows.
Right.
That was a favorite theme of yours, is that we can't fix the environment by using fossil fuels.
yeah,
We have to start we can't fix the environment by using systems that were designed to use fossil fuels. We
Right.
have to start putting solar panels everywhere, or we have to start putting wind turbines we have to build a parallel institution.
right.
We can't fix.
You have to make the other one obsolete
Yeah.
rather than always saying, well, we just have to fix the broken system. No, you have to make another system that makes the broken or corrupt or decrepit system obsolete. It's no longer used, like if there was a lobby on people who built who had horse stables, I'm sure they would have not liked to see the automobile come around. There was all this thing like,
Right.
those cars are never going to last. They're never going to work. How are you going to get gas when you're out in the middle of the desert?
Out in the middle of nowhere.
What happens if you get a flat tire? You're doomed forever.
And now
I'll stick with the horse.
there are gas stations everywhere.
For better or for worse.
Mm.
So now we're at that phase where there are outposts, there are people who are doing new things, there are organizations that are trying to lead the charge to make sure that we have something that we can feel good about doing to make change in the world rather than just being a consumer of what reality is being offered.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's that
710 and
article.
805 says the only way to do that will be to prove higher efficiency systems without being assassinated. And that's the problem, is there's a lot of money involved. This comes back to the original point of Charles's article, is that we have plenty of enough resources on the planet. There's plenty of money and plenty of food and plenty of housing and plenty of clothing and plenty of land. But there's a disagreement about how it should be all spread around, and that comes down to finances and the concept of mine. That's my finances. So like he's saying the only way to start a parallel institution for energy that's not run off fossil fuels, which are sucking the life out of the planet, is to prove that there's a higher efficiency system without being assassinated.
Right.
And you would probably be assassinated by the people whose financial structures would be threatened by not using fossil fuels.
Who killed the electric cars in movies that is out there to watch?
We should have electric cars.
Yeah.
Already. You can build roads that are solar panels.
Right.
It's been done in small scale places. You can build a road that is a solar panel.
I wanted to read Facebook status by Facebook friend Tristan Hartwell, because I wanted to throw this question to anybody who's listening right now. The question is, serious question here. How many people here think that once a vaccine is made for COVID-19, we will go back to normal? I need opinions on this. It's not my opinion, just something I heard someone say. So they're like, are we going back to normal? How many people think we're going back to normal? How many people think that they'll find the virus and then we'll just get back to what we were doing? Discuss amongst yourselves.
Right. I don't, because
I don't think so
like
either.
It's not just suddenly going to pop out of existence.
Right.
I mean, I know people feel like the Black Plague disappeared.
We're not going to be shaking hands the way we used to for a while.
That would be nice. I think shaking hands is dumb.
Do you know where that came from?
Shaking hands?
Yeah.
No.
So shaking hands, I had this a mob. I think it was like some kind of mob enforcer in Los Angeles who worked at the Improv, who hung out at the Improv. And I went to shake his hand when I first met him, and he goes, "I don't shake hands." And I said, "Okay." He goes, "Do you know why people shake hands?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Because in the olden days, when you were traveling on yonder road and you came around the corner and you encountered somebody, you don't know if they're good guys or bad guys, right? So the thing to do was to offer your hand, which showed that you did not have a weapon and you were not threatening and you were not going to kill them. The open hand was the opposite of the hand in the jacket, where you were defended against that other person. So
which
it was
doesn't
a way
really
to say,
account for lefties, but I see where he's coming from.
and that's why I said that's why you don't shake hands. So he's basically saying, I have a gun and I could probably kill you, so I'm not going to give you the symbol that I won't kill you.
Because I might.
So that's where the handshake came from.
That's funny.
I'm not going to kill you. That's really what the essence of what the handshake is. And I think maybe we can move beyond that.
Not just
as a social
not
custom.
just blindly promising to not kill each other.
Exactly, all the time, in perpetuity.
Yeah.
Why don't we take a little break, and then that way we have a nice tight hour for the radio show. And then you can do the social media stuff, and then we'll come back at the top of the hour with a little piece from Hansi Freinacht.
Such an odd thing to do.
Why?
Taking a break during a live stream. We had a signal break.
I have to go.
Go to the bathroom. That's fine. That's fine. You take a break then, dear. We had a signal breakdown partway through the first hour. I don't know why Facebook does this, but it's done it like 3 times now, where the live stream, Twitch will just pick back up with your live stream where you were at, but Facebook cuts it into a piece and then starts again with a new live stream. So we had to like boost everybody over to the new live stream. Normal keeps shifting. Yes. I don't fear change, which is really funny because my dad always had a saying growing up that Bolix fear change. That was my maiden name, Bolix fear change. And it was a joke, but I think it was often used as a kind of semi-humorous put down of any attempts to shake things up and do stuff differently than you've done them before. I know a lot of people do fear change. I know a lot of people, I don't think people naturally fear change. I think people are naturally curious and naturally exploratory and naturally evolve. But I think people fear change because we are exhausted and don't have extra energy to handle change. We just need to know what do I have to do to survive in this environment? Where are the bad animals? And how do I find food? That's the evolutionary perspective. And so anytime something changes, there's this fear, this white knuckle fear that now I have to find out all over again. Where do I get food, and who are the bad guys, and what are the rules, you know? And so change can be scary when people are exhausted all the time. And I think our current systems exhaust people. Everybody is working too hard for not enough. And we've been trained over the last 100 years of Judeo-Christian principles of original sin, coupled with game theory from the public relations magicians of the early 1900s, that there's not enough and you need to get yours before somebody else gets yours. That's game theory. And so people are constantly on the defensive and exhausted, and we don't have enough. And so change is scary because you don't have anything left to give, to be able to adapt and be curious and evolve. And it would be more fun if we could all have the energy to adapt and be curious and evolve.
Agreed.
Yeah. Are you ready to play our Hansi bit?
Sure, let me find it.
And you're going to have to mute your Facebook tab.
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, 710-805 says he misses hugs.
Yeah,
that's
a real
really
thing.
hard. That's really hard. I think I mean, somebody in your comments made a good point that after the Great Depression, everybody became the grandparents that said, "You're gonna eat everything on your plate, young man."
Right.
And that maybe after the coronavirus era, everybody will become the grandparents that's like, "Wash your hands, wash your hands."
Yeah, that's no doubt.
Yeah. And that's something that we seek to. I don't want to use war language. You know, Dark has inspired me to try to not use war language. So whereas the first thing to come out of my mouth might be like, that's something that we fight against on Post-Orthodoxy, I want to try to use the most positive language possible because our words are life, our words are power. So the concept of is something that we seek to liberate ourselves from on Post-Orthodoxy. We seek to free ourselves from always having the same perspective our whole lives. Because if you grew up needing to clean your whole plate because that was the only food you were going to get for the day, you don't want to spread. You shouldn't want to spread that same fear and anxiety around on your children and grandchildren if they do have enough to eat. And you don't want to be the old wackadoodle that is out of touch with the current times, that it's okay. Like, you know how much I have had to train myself that it's okay for me to just get a tall size drink at Starbucks. Because if it's not enough, I can always go back and get a venti size. But I can get another one. You know, like I have the freedom to go get another one. But I was trained to think scarcity all the time. That this might be my only treat all month. The one time that we get to go and get a special treat. Because there are 7 kids, and so we don't get special treats very often. And so you would get a venti, and you would get all the add-ons, and you would get extra whipped cream, because that was your only chance. And I had to like the first few times that I got tall-sized drinks for myself at Starbucks, I had like panic attack feelings, because like being in a place where you have no freedom of choice and then moving to a place where you do have freedom of choice, it's very hard to not still act like you don't have freedom of choice. It's very hard to not still act like somebody else is just going to come and slam the hammer down at some point. Did you find your Hansi bit?
I found the Hansi bit. Let's see how I'm going to test the audio here and see if we can.
Hansi Freinacht, all alone in the Swiss Alps.
So I don't know if, I think you can probably hear that on the live stream.
That's our goal, is that the live stream audience will be able to hear it, and then we'll add it in later for our radio audience.
Right. So a few weeks ago, we did an interview with Hansi Freinacht, spokesperson for the meta-modernist movement, philosopher living in the Swiss Alps, as he says, all alone. And we did an hour-long interview with him talking about meta-modernism. What is it, and what is it not? So we did a 10 minutes, I guess, 8 minutes or so on the last one. So we're just going to pick up here and listen to a point where she has to stop it and say stuff. How's
We're just going to listen to some of our interview and then have a discussion with you guys and see what you think about it. So get your comment fingers ready. Yeah,
and so as you're listening, feel free to comment on the Facebook live stream if that's where you're participating in this program.
So this is one big developmental direction where meta-modern society, a society that goes beyond modern society, would probably invest a lot more of its resources, of its time, effort, and resources. So people would be doing things like meditating a lot more. There would be a lot more training in introspection, in seeing our own thoughts and emotions. There would be many more mechanisms throughout education to socialize harmonic minds, or to get us into places where we feel at ease with ourselves and with one another and with the world. So that would be one such direction that I believe reality or society needs to evolve into. And there are others. I guess I should let you guys in. But that's a start. Metamodernism would be the movement I work to spark through my writing and through talking to people like yourselves, and is one where we together explore with the best of our science and so on how to develop ourselves as human beings from the inside out, how to become, in a sense, better citizens, better human beings, and exploring what that is as we go along.
So Hansi, I have two questions. My first question, I guess, would be, do you have an idea or a sense of what makes a person a metamodernist? How would you describe a metamodernist? Am I a metamodernist? How would I know if I was somebody that is a metamodernist? That would be my first question.
And actually, I'd like to go back one step, and could you maybe define, like, is metamodernism, this is
It's a philosophy,
it's a philosophy, right? That's out there, and the work that you're doing.
Are you trying to build bridges back?
Right, no, just do your question first. We'll go back, because I want to talk about what like the etymology of metamodernism, what that word actually means to people who are not familiar with it. But maybe if you could do that, and then describe how someone would know if they are one.
So let's start with the etymology then. I mean, first of all, I noticed this is relatively difficult for people to, for audiences who haven't heard the term. I once gave a talk 20 minutes about metamodernism. I said the word every 10 seconds. Afterwards, I found people didn't know that the talk was about metamodernism, because it's a new word.
Yes.
So meta means, I mean, it's a Greek word. It means either through or above. So or after. So originally it means after. So like when Aristotle once wrote the metaphysics, he wrote one thing about the natural world, and then he wrote things that we need to consider beyond the natural world, or when we consider the natural world as a whole. So physics and metaphysics, nature and after nature.
I've always thought of meta as an umbrella.
Or beyond is the way I always sort of saw it, beyond physics.
Yeah, I mean, that's the original term. I mean, in today's language, as you say, it has more of this connotation. It's about like a meta comment would be a comment on the discussion itself, where let's say we're talking about oranges and apples, and then I say a meta comment, then of course we're talking about oranges and apples and so on. So, I mean, people may have heard the word postmodernism, which means after modern society or after modernity, postmodernity or postmodernism. And post and meta are actually the same word. So post means after in Latin, and meta means after in Greek. But meta has gotten this other connotation that, it also has something to do with going through or beyond or viewing something from above. So for a while, a lot of people have claimed that after modern society, things have shifted and we're no longer in modern society. It's better to call it postmodern. And there has been a criticism and critique of a lot of ideas, of core ideas of modern society that had to do with the progress and a materialist worldview, a very strong belief in science and so on. And postmodernists, they would argue that, wait a minute, things are a bit more complicated than that. Science isn't this monolithic thing you can always trust. It's always dependent on the eye of the beholder, and there are going to be financial interests or power structures or in-group biases and so on, which affect what scientific questions are deemed respectable, which receives funding, and which are viewed positively in peer review processes and so on. So the postmodernists, they criticize modern society and they say, wait a minute, this isn't so modern, really. Actually, we're in a much weirder world than the one of progress and physics and so on. I mean, there are many different ways of seeing the world, and they ultimately don't really have one path to the truth. So the postmodern perspectives that have grown over the last 50 years or so, particularly, they tend to be skeptical of one big truth. But then again,
What happened?
We don't know.
Oh, it froze. Try again.
That's all right.
You want to stop here?
Yeah, gosh. I recommended folks. I know this is not very ideal. This isn't the funnest live stream ever, just because it's just the two of us sitting in our living room. Billie Jean, you have to go lay down.
You don't get to play with the fish anymore.
No moose.
No squeakies.
No fish.
All right.
The clicking has to stop. And then we just sit here and don't do anything and just listen to an audio recording, and that makes it a whole nother level of boring, and I understand.
It's information.
It is.
Do you have any thoughts on his take on metamodernism?
Well, he's trying to build up an understanding of the trajectory of these philosophies of viewing the world over the past several hundred years. I shared an article with folks in the live stream of this metamodernism in 5 terrible diagrams.
Right.
It's a great thing. You can look it up in Google. Metamodernism in 5 terrible diagrams. So in the Victorian era, we had modernism, and then postmodernism came after that, and then postmodernism, and then metamodernism. And so it's talking about the evolution of how people who have the extra energy or the desire to evaluate how society works have moved through these different philosophies of society, of viewing society and how humans work together. And as is often the case, the people that have the energy and the desire to evaluate something often become the creators of that thing.
Right.
So it's hopeful, even though like single moms with 2 jobs and 3 kids don't have the energy or necessarily the desire to be learning societal philosophies such as postmodernism or metamodernism. It's hopeful to me that there are people out there who are saying we need to shift from postmodernism to metamodernism. We need to become...
Well, postmodernism and
they're not
postmodern. You're right.
Yeah, they're not the same thing. Metamodernism is the new era that various philosophers on the planet are working to move us towards.
Metamodernism is postmodernism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Roughly speaking. What America needs now is some authentic modernism, a combination of the modernist and postmodernist impulses that actually reconstructs that which was deconstructed, while also acknowledging that we learn by deconstructing. That is, metamodern ideas can join all deconstructions and previously flawed constructions to use ideas that are non-binary and also non-trajectory.
Okay.
We're not trying to necessarily get to somewhere, such as manifest destiny,
right,
which was a primary concept of modernism. All that means is that they juxtapose, put on top of each other, many different and contradictory positions, and help us reconceptualize the entire environment that we are in, rather than going all in on a single oversimplified description.
Okay.
So
What's that from?
this is from Seth Abramson's Metamodernism in 5 Terrible Diagrams.
Okay.
So for instance, he says, a metamodern take on the Russia scandal would view it as the best opportunity we Americans have ever had in our history to recommit ourselves to our values and to one another by recalling the first principles that are equally appealing to all Americans: transparency in government, one man, one vote, belief in the goodwill and competence of many of the men and women in law enforcement, partisanship ending at the borders of the nation, country over party, and so on. In this view, the president is a godsend and perhaps the most important president ever because he's giving all of us society builders a chance to actually come together, with the only cost being the good name of a man who finally thinks only of himself. I don't really know what he means by that last bit.
Okay.
But this is like the 4th time I've read this article, and I learn new things every time. And I think that's a hopeful perspective to take, because I think a lot of times people get daunted by our industrial era school system and the way that it taught people to learn.
Right.
That, well, I didn't get it, so I'm dumb. Maybe you just need to read it a few more times. Maybe you just need to Google some terms.
Yeah.
I'm Googling terms all the time.
Yeah.
Learning is a process, and our school system doesn't teach people how to learn. It teaches people how to regurgitate facts. Do you have any thoughts on what Hansi said today?
No, we were just getting into it. Do you want to go a little further?
Sure, we can go a little further.
Because we did ask him at one point, I don't know if it's going to be in this segment, about how do you take something as large as a philosophical movement and connect that with the proletariat, with the soccer mom, or what have you.
Well, I mean, with the citizens, like, so we're in a state globally where most of the 8 billion people are exhausted.
Yeah.
And don't have enough. That's the state that we're in. We've had some interesting interactions recently with upper middle class white Americans who don't think of the planet as being a planet where most of the 8 billion people are exhausted and don't have enough.
Right.
They mostly interact with upper middle class white people who have college degrees and don't have to worry about whether or not they can buy groceries or pay their rent. And they kind of get in this bubble where they think that's what their problems are everybody else's problems.
Yeah,
most people in the West struggle with being able to make 2 car payments, right? No, it's like, no, most people in the US struggle with being able to buy groceries.
Yeah.
If we're talking actual numbers. And so, like, even getting away from the term proletariat, it's like, we're talking about the majority of the planet doesn't have enough and is exhausted.
Right.
And therefore doesn't have the energy or the time or even the interest
to explore a new philosophy.
For the planet.
Right. Well, let's go a little further.
Okay.
You're always skeptical of one big truth, and always skeptical of progress, and you're always criticizing. You're always picking things apart, and you're always putting a question mark on everything. Like, what are you left with? In the end, you're left with the position that one of the big postmodern philosophers, Michel Foucault, this French bald guy who ran around causing us during the 60s, 70s, and early 80s, he was asked, wait a minute, you just pick apart everything. You're just against everything. Well, what do you believe in? And he said, you know what? There are so many economists and lawyers and engineers in the world, and they're busy building the world. And good on them. More power to them. They do that. I'm just going to pick it apart. But in the end, his position was always to criticize power structures and to pick things apart. And it's, after all, not a very productive way to put together a new society in dire times of need. To actually put forward bold hypotheses or bold ideas about what the future might look like and what the direction of our overall development as humanity and societies might be, or in which directions it might point. So metamodernism, it's a lot like postmodernism. It says, aha, yes, we should pick things apart. We shouldn't take things for granted. We should be critical, and we should criticize even our own perspectives, and we should learn to take the perspective of as many excluded voices and groups and so on as possible. And that's hard work. And we should demask unjust power structures when they hide themselves in our language and so on. But then we have to put it back together and say, okay, what society do we wish to create? And what's the best possible argument for creating that kind of society? And there's then a big difference between metamodernism and postmodernism. So postmodernism has been around for more than 50 years, or been growing in many shapes and guises, but metamodernism is relatively new, and it says, okay, so here's a vision for society, and it starts bringing up things that have to do with remaking modern society. So meta-modern, we are in modern society, we're crawling out of our own skin, we're looking at it as it was a box. Modern society has all of this science, all of this potential, all of these huge resources. At the same time, it has a best before date. It's going to crash sooner or later due to ecological sustainability issues and so on. And it produces excessive inequalities across the globe, and it alienates people. It undermines the mental health of a lot of, especially young people. And there are no real solutions for this. These were, by the way, the critiques leveled at modern society by the postmodernists. So metamodern society, or metamodernism, or metamodern philosophy takes this challenge seriously. It says, okay, I'm not just gonna criticize this stuff, I'm going to try to recreate it.
What do you think about that?
Rather than just criticizing how things are broke down,
right,
I'm going to create something new.
So that's the argument. If you are trying to be involved in, let's say the Democratic Party, and you're I want to, maybe we can do things differently, and people are like, you got to get with the team. We're not thinking differently. We got to stay with the team.
If you're
and do
criticizing
the
thing. The team, you must hate the team.
You must hate the team or be the other team.
Right.
Right.
Rick Booth says, if you believe the word modern means to go forward in a society, the United States hasn't moved forward since the 70s. How do you feel about that?
Well, modernism, like he said, actually goes all the way back to like Victorian times. So. Well,
and I think one of the things that I shared from Charles's article, The Coronation, today, was that I shared on our Instagram, was his quote, should lack of death be a mark of progress?
Right. That was
basically
the other thing.
Is that what we mean? We're progressing as a society, people aren't dying as much. And is that actually an indicator of health?
Right.
Because we're all staying home, and we're all not hugging, and we're all, if we were to look at it as a whole, this is not a healthier state. A lot of people, suicide rates in Tennessee have skyrocketed over the last month. It's really unhealthy for social animals such as humans to be isolated.
Well, yeah.
Some humans do really enjoy isolation, but not in the have to stay home all the time because you don't get along with people kind of thing. Even people who are introverted struggle with finding healthy socialization.
Well, I think this is a time where people who are very much need the social to feel themselves.
Yeah.
The people who've been...
Go home and find yourself alone without any help or any opinions or any perspectives.
And then there's the people who have been doing that for years, who have been home alone because they don't feel like they fit into the zeitgeist of the world as it is.
Right.
They don't feel like the politics are worth fighting for because they're so corrupt. They don't feel like they don't have a church because that's all been shown to be a little flimsy. So now where do I... So you just end up being a gamer or an artist or somebody who isolates to do the thing. And I think where this isolation is really messing with extroverts, I think I'm seeing a lot of more activity online with people who've been hunkered down, trying to figure out how can we be doing the world better. And it's nice to see that stuff coming up a little bit. But it does feel like, I don't want to be pessimistic. It feels like those little windows don't just stay open. That's why, portals open and then they close.
Yeah.
And this is a time where we could be very actively pursuing alternative structures, alternative ways of doing things, making bold moves in terms of maybe refining your party or reforming your party. Everybody has time to sit around and write and read emails.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of potential for change, but without a head. I mean, that's the thing that I thought was really fascinating about Occupy Wall Street, is that there was no leader dictating where the movement would go. There was this very cumbersome consensus process that didn't lead to dynamic pushes, where you have now this thing is like everybody's. This is not just a United States thing. This is not just a California thing. This is like a global condition that is affecting people to one degree or another degree. And in that, like, we're finding out that maybe going to a White House press briefing is going to give us all the information we need to make informed choices. So if it's not going to be a message from your government that you're listening to, who are you listening to?
Who is helping?
Who's helping, and how do you discern what information is good information?
Mm-hmm.
We've been in this sort of amorphous post-truth world for a while now, but suddenly good information has become more paramount. So I don't know, maybe what shakes out of this is people are forced to refine their sources of information, who they're listening to, why they're listening to them, and maybe nailing down some better sources of information make for some the ability to maybe make change, to move some things forward.
I really like the paragraph from Charles's article. To reduce the risk of another pandemic, shall we choose to live in a society without hugs, handshakes, and high fives forevermore? Shall we choose to live in a society where we can no longer gather en masse? Shall the concert, the sports competition, and the festival be a thing of the past? Shall children no longer play with other children? Shall all human contact be mediated by computers and masks? No more dance classes, no more karate classes, no more conferences, no more churches? Is death reduction to be the standard by which to measure progress? Does human advancement mean separation? Is it more important for lots of people to stay alive than for the people who stay alive
to have a quality of life,
to live happily and healthfully?
Right.
Is quality, is not dying more important than quality of life? And this is, I mean, that's a whole religious rabbit trail right there that comes, you know, we talk about abortion, we talk about physician-assisted suicide, we talk about people in comas, we talk, you know, like, is just not dying more important than quality of life? And why, as a nation that thinks of itself, that self-identifies in polls as over 70% Christian, why is dying so bad? Like, why would you rather someone live a life of suffering than die if you're going to go to heaven when you die?
One thing I was really I'm a little disturbed by is there were a few prominent, there was like Fox News host and some politician in Texas that basically said, you know what, I'm a senior citizen and I'm willing to not give up this great country and this great economy. You know, if a few old geezers die, it's worth it to not upset the
economy.
The economy, right?
Which I was kind of like, what?
No, so everybody immediately goes to, you Republicans want to see grandma die, which is exactly what they did with us whenever they said, oh, we need to have a different healthcare system. They're going to kill your grandma.
Oh, boy.
Like, I think it's more nuanced than that. Now, I don't necessarily agree that it's worth grandma dying to save the economy, because I'm not a big fan of, I don't think the economy is like, it needs some improvement. It could use a mechanic under the hood. So I'm not like a big fan of like kill grandma for the economy. However, I do think this idea of like, how much are you going to lock down for freedom?
Yeah.
How much are you going to lock down? When does it become ironic? Where all the protections have led to a lowered quality of life for the majority, right? I mean, is the virus man-made, or is it just is nature coming in and getting rid of a bunch of old folks?
Right. Why is death reduction the most important piece of progress?
Yeah.
We have a problem child in the house.
We're gonna have to lock him in a room.
You need to just go put her in Sam's quarters.
Carrie, yeah, you come on up here with that toy. Give me that.
Arr, Billie Jean. We're just gonna make a pile here, add it to the pile of shame.
For some reason, Billie Jean gets really excited for every episode.
Well, and I think she just doesn't like that we're not giving her attention.
She doesn't do this to us when we're just sitting around doing stuff.
No, it's when we're doing a live stream.
Billie Jean, please go lay down and enjoy the rest of the show.
Yeah. I'd like to read another article about this death reduction as the height of modern progress.
Oh.
From another paragraph from Charles Einstein's article.
Okay.
Eisenstein's. He says, well, I'll just read forever. I just won't even stop. But I will. Let's see. Okay. Over my lifetime, I've seen society place more and more emphasis on safety, security, and risk reduction. It has especially impacted childhood. As a young boy, it was normal for us to roam a mile from home unsupervised, behavior that would earn parents a visit from Child Protective Services today. It also manifests in the form of latex gloves for more and more professions, hand sanitizers everywhere, locked, guarded, and surveilled school buildings, intensified airport and border security, heightened awareness of legal liability and liability insurance, metal detectors, and searches before entering many sports arenas and public buildings, and so on. Writ large, it takes the form of the security state. The mantra, safety first, comes from a value system that makes survival top priority and that depreciates other values like fun, adventure, play, and the challenging of limits.
Right.
Other cultures have different priorities. For instance, many traditional and indigenous cultures are much less protective of children, as documented in Jean Leidloff's classic, The Continuum Concept. They allow children risks and responsibilities that would seem insane to most modern people, believing that this is necessary for children to develop self-reliance and good judgment. I think modern people, especially younger people, retain some of this inherent willingness to sacrifice safety in order to live life fully. The surrounding culture, however, lobbies us relentlessly to live in fear and has constructed systems that embody fear. In these systems, staying safe is overridingly important. Thus, we have a medical system in which most decisions are based on calculations of risk, and in which the worst possible outcome, marking the physician's ultimate failure, is the death of the patient. Yet all the while, we know that death awaits us regardless. A life saved actually means a death postponed.
A death postponed, I like that line.
We're all going to die.
Right.
Why is dying so scary? Why is it like, no, please don't, plastic surgery?
Well, it's that individual identity thing. It's our lack of connection to nature, lack of connection to the natural processes of life, of the continuum of life, and that we get to, we all got participation trophies this round, so we're very special. And us going away would be very sad because we're very special. I think that's a part of it.
Yeah, the disconnect, the religious disconnect over the past couple hundred years of disconnecting humans from the rest of nature. Humans aren't animals, we're not part of the ecosystem. God made the whole planet and then he made humans special to enjoy the planet.
Aliens.
The planet is for the humans.
Right.
The humans aren't part of the planet.
That's the story. That's the story.
Yeah. We're only part of the planet in that we've been told to go out and take dominion over the planet and to control nature and to make properly ordered lawns. And to not behave like animals. And so when you are separate from animal processes all the time, it's really scary that those processes still have complete power over you.
Yeah.
You will still have your period every month. You will still die.
Right.
You are still an animal.
Yeah, I don't know. We don't deal with death very well. We don't mourn death very well. We don't do it healthily, generally speaking, in the culture.
Old people locked away in boxes.
It's problematic. You know, I don't have that same feeling. I'm not super, like, you know, death does happen. And the idea, I understand, it is ironic where you have a redemptive religion that's
Right.
the majority of the country that says life will be better after you die.
Just survive the rules until you can go to heaven.
Maybe people don't want to die because they know they can't do the rules, because the rules are untenable and they've been faking it.
So people
Because it's really about the heart
So,
of what you
right.
did, not really your actual things.
It's
but
about your
intentions
intentions.
and your heart, right? There's a lot of people that are not able to follow the
rules. So they're afraid of death
They're
because
afraid of death.
modern Christianity, evangelical Christianity, has told people if you're not following these strict rules, you're not going to heaven, and they're terrified that if they do die, they won't go to heaven, so it's best to put off death as long as possible.
Yeah, I don't have a religion, but I also have a vague sense of continuity. Not even if, like, so I sort of figure if I die and that's just it, pull the plug and the machine is smashed and all that was there is no longer anywhere else. I'm not the only one to have experienced that. That's kind of the gig of being a living thing.
You get to be alive and then you die.
And then you die. If there's something more after life, if there's some sort of continuity of consciousness, if consciousness is some sort of thing that uses physical forms, I don't know how all that stuff works. I'm open and I'm kind of excited to find out. But if it is just lights out, again, I'm not the only one to have experienced that.
Right.
So I don't feel like stressing the natural process of life and death makes for a good life.
Well, but for a lot of Christians, I can see how death would be terrifying, because if you do die and you didn't follow the rules correctly, you'll go to hell.
Yeah.
Forever. You know,
that was a big thing for me, because hell for me wasn't about being separated or loss of love, because I wasn't a fan of my family and I really just wanted to be out of there.
Mm-hmm.
So other places were always attractive to me, even hell. It wasn't about the loss of people for me being a young kid. It was that really gory iconography of hell. Like saying that it was unimaginable torment.
Right.
It always challenged my imagination.
Laying on a bed of glass with no skin.
Yeah, rolling on a hot beach of a lava lake, having to roll around on broken bottles with, like as a little kid, I'm trying to think, what could be more unimaginable?
What could be worse than me masturbating?
Right, whatever,
so
the imagination
bad?
is, like imagining it, and they're saying it's worse than that. So I was like, wow, how so I would go down that road of how bad it is, and that's a nice control mechanism, because you set your own worst fear for yourself. It's brilliant, unimaginable torment.
So only you can imagine it.
Only you can imagine it. It's the worst thing you can imagine. Boy, you don't want to do it.
Ugh.
That's a good line.
You make your own hell.
Yeah.
So
literally.
So the germ theory and the metamodernist theory and the coronavirus pandemic and coming from a kingdom of love versus a kingdom of fear, like a lot of it really does come back to this separation from nature and fear of dying.
Yes, I think there's a lot there.
Are we all staying in our houses because we think that we will have a better life, or because we are afraid of people dying?
Maybe I can answer that one for myself.
Okay.
I feel like I was kind of already doing it already, so it's not a big sacrifice.
Not a big sacrifice for us personally.
And also, I feel like, all right, if there's a virus going around and we don't have the gear to deal with the virus, it's no skin off, or little, it's a minor inconvenience to not go out to the bar tonight.
Right.
Or tomorrow night, or go to this festival, or do this thing. It's a minor inconvenience to make sure that maybe we gear up so that fewer people die. To me, I'm okay to do that.
But the two of us have a very unique situation.
Yeah.
Like for people that have lost their jobs, or people like where, say, friends of ours, the father has a lot of autoimmune problems. The whole family is now staying home, and I know that they're very personally motivated to stay home and be very safe, and the kids like help sanitize the groceries when they get dropped off at the front door, and then they all go take showers and wash their clothes because they don't want their dad to die.
Like, we're early into this whole thing. Like, if we're all expected to keep paying rent and not work, it's going to get hairy for a lot of people. It's going to get hairy for us. If you can't work and you have to pay rent and you're supposed to stay at home all day, there's a problem that has to be solved. This is where we should be. That's why I'm saying there's a lot of, the people who are supposed to be solving those problems aren't exactly like super inspiring of my faith. They're going to do a good job for me as my political representative. So, yeah, we're early into this. We don't know where it's going to go. Does it get weirder? Do they start enforcing it? Do we have cops on the street to make sure we're not walking the dog too close to somebody else? Like, I don't know where it goes from here. Right now, we have, like, right now, I'm not crying. A month from now, I could be crying.
Right.
Like, if we have to pay rent and we can't work anymore. So that situation is like, I don't know what's going to happen in a month. But right now, that's why I think the most important thing I can do is try to think of creative options while we have the opportunity, because I don't know how long this opportunity is going to be here to be loose and reimagine things before we have to start reacting to the new things that are occurring.
Let's just for kicks, let's do a because like this is a tesseract of a problem. This problem is not a three-dimensional problem that we can perceive with our three-dimensional minds. It's a like six-dimensional problem that we can only work on pieces of it at a time.
Right. Okay.
And of each of those pieces, it has six-dimensional solutions and options and histories and futures, right? So let's just take one subject for kicks, for brainstorming. Let's just talk about currency. Because I know money is on a lot of people's minds right now, and people are having a really horrible time with money right now.
Yeah.
Who were already having a really horrible time with money, but it's gotten way worse recently. So let's just talk financially. This is something I was thinking. What if nobody has to pay their electric bill?
Okay.
Electricity is generated by a dam or by a wind turbine or whatever. It's not something that someone is giving to me that was theirs. It's just being created by the structure of the dam. So
somebody upholds the infrastructure
to
deliver.
The infrastructure has to be maintained.
Yes, right.
But it's not like you are giving me your shirt and then I pay you for your shirt.
Right.
It's just being pulled from the environment, electricity. So we say nobody in the U.S. has to pay for their electricity ever again.
Okay.
Just as an example. We're like, this is stupid. I don't know why people are paying to be warm in the winter and not hot in the summer and be able to wash their clothes, right? So let's just say we ixnay having to pay an electric bill.
Okay.
So what happens? Who still needs to be paid? The guy
who works on the line?
The guy in the truck.
Yeah.
Right? That goes around and fixes the lines still needs to be paid.
Yeah.
The guys making sure the dam doesn't burst still needs to be paid.
What about the shareholders? The people who have bought into that company so they can make a lot of money whenever they drive up the rates during
What do you
what about those guys? Shareholders in the company, the electric company.
Yeah, I see. In my imagination, I think
because they're thinking of their retirement. Their retirement is based on the shares that they have in the power company, and if the power company gets nationalized, suddenly what happens to their wealth?
Right. It would be as if having electricity would be something that everybody has, but it's not something you're making money off of. Maybe I'm hypothesizing that people should only make money off of goods or services that they're providing. I don't know if you should be able to make money off of other people paying somebody else money. I don't think you should be able to make money off of gambling. Like, if you want to go gamble for kicks, you know, go to Vegas, go to the casino, support the Indian health reservation, the Indian reservations.
And do the lottery.
Go gamble. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I don't think human beings being able to cook and wash their clothes and stay warm in the wintertime should be a for-profit industry.
It seems we got there somehow.
I feel like if we had an ideal structure, humans would pay taxes, and those taxes would go towards paying the guy in the truck that fixes the lines and the guy at the dam that keeps the dam from bursting.
You're talking Marxism now.
That's Marxism?
Yeah. My
tax money goes to benefit me and my country?
Marxism is basically owning the people own the mechanisms.
So Marxism is
like the people own the industry. Like, so if you have steel for your car, the people own the steel mine. The people own the car company.
How do I own a steel mine?
Well, that's the thing, is the money is somebody is paid to do the extraction, but the money doesn't go into a feedback loop of an offshore bank account of people who have never got their hands dirty, right? The idea of making money hand over fist, just continuing to make money beyond. So, like, the guy who invented.
So are we saying we shouldn't have investments anymore?
Well, I think we need to look at how we do it.
Should you be able to make money when you're not actually doing anything to make that money.
So, okay, think about this idea. Let's say, I like to go back to the car insurance thing, right?
Yeah.
So, I like the idea that if I am driving down the road and some drunken maniac wrecks into me, that at least they have some insurance to compensate me for the time that I spent in the hospital and to maybe get my vehicle back up and running. I like that that's a thing. I don't know if having to be compelled by the state to pay a private company insurance.
Compelled is such a pretty word for you're legally forced,
You're forced
by the government to pay a
if you're going
private
to operate on the road,
a private for-profit industry.
and then they take that money and they invest it in whatever the hell they want, and they do, you know, they do all these funny money games and make the stock market do interesting things. If we all had to pay insurance, let's say there's 33,000 people in Silver Bow County. Let's say there's 33,000 cars for convenience.
Okay.
Let's everybody to operate it needs to have some insurance so that we feel safe operating on the streets.
Right.
And all that money goes to the Butte Silver Bow Insurance Treasury.
Okay.
So then we pay out for the wrecks and we pay out for the things that happen.
Okay.
And then there's a board. Let's say there's a board of citizens, like a city council, that gets to decide what we do with the extra money. Maybe it goes
extra
to
money, as in people were paying in their car insurance to the Butte Silver Bow Car Insurance Fund.
Yeah.
But we didn't have very many wrecks that year.
So you have a surplus.
So we keep a certain amount around in case of accidents.
In case everybody wrecks, you have that money.
Right.
Now you have extra.
Okay, so then the extra, in my mind, like, it should be like to like. Like, if there's extra car insurance money in the pool, then that extra car insurance money should go towards maintaining things the cars need. So I think if Butte Silver Bow citizens are paying into a car insurance fund, the board of directors of that car insurance fund, after keeping aside certain amounts of money to make sure we always can cover someone who gets in a wreck, should put that money towards repairing the roads. Or putting solar panels in the roads.
Well, you don't know how much money car insurance makes. That's a lot of money. Where's the calculator? How much is, so like, let's say super low end, let's say $100, because some people have high, some people have low.
Yeah, my car insurance in Georgia was $570 a month.
A month.
Because Atlanta is so messed up, they wanted to insure anybody in the entire state against the level of wrecks that were always happening in Atlanta.
So let's say $250 a month.
Okay, for car insurance.
For car, let's just say it, because I know people are paying more than that.
Right, if you have a really nice car, or if you have a really bad driving record.
Call it full coverage.
Okay.
So that's $8 million. Wait, let's see here.
$250 a month times 12 months.
No, just for a month.
Oh, just for a month. Okay. 200.
That's like $8 million, $8.25 million.
$250 a month times 30,000 insured drivers in Silver Bow County equals. My thing did a weird thing.
$8,250,000 every month.
1 month?
In 1 month. So that's if everybody was paying that rate. So if you're thinking about,
I want to say swear words about the guys that own Progressive.
Exactly. So that's just, imagine a city of 20 million people. That's a lot of money. So where does that money go?
Where is all that extra money going?
They gamble on Wall Street with it. That's what Wall Street is. And
then they have lots and lots and lots and lots of money.
That's why they get bonuses of $27 million because they live in a funny money land.
No one should ever have their car insurance claim turned down. That's ridiculous.
So, this is the kind of thing that gets you killed, is talking about that. Like if you don't have to nationalize the steel mill, but you could localize the money that's on an insurance safety net. Instead of giving it to a private corporation that the state is making you give to a private corporation.
Right.
State enforced.
Who can then do whatever they want with the money.
I'm okay. Like you could maybe lower the price of insurance for folks and pay it into a pool and then have a slush fund that you can help with your education system. You can help with your roads, do things that benefit the community. You could do that, but we don't.
The price of our car insurance is only the price that it is because most people accept that it is the price that it is.
Right.
Not because you actually need drivers to be paying that much money.
There's no market force making sure that that's the thing. So there's so much money in insurance. So these are the kind of things that I think we should be having a discussion about. Like rather than giving all your money to, like putting your money in Wells Fargo, which is then they're gonna take that money. I mean, there was a big divestment away from Wells Fargo whenever they found out Wells Fargo was investing. People found out they were investing in the Dakota Access Pipeline.
Oh.
And they're like, oh, you guys, wait, I have my money
In
you're
your bank.
in your bank, and you're taking my money and investing it in this pipeline. So people are like, I'm not doing that anymore. So there's a big, if you don't agree with those politics, don't work with that bank.
Right.
So the way that instead of going to the big banks, I think there has been a movement, and there should be more of a movement towards credit unions where the money stays locally, and then you can be on the board of your credit union and figure out where the extra money in your credit union goes and how policy works at your bank. You could do the same thing with your car insurance.
So how do we speak to the middleman? How do we speak to not the people that own Progressive? So there are the shareholders in Progressive car insurance who are gambling massive amounts of money on the stock market and making money off of other people's money. And have way more than they'll ever spend in their entire lifetimes.
Yeah, it's
but then there are also people who have worked hard in a good old American job and have extra money and want to invest it so that someday they can stop working and actually enjoy their life.
Right.
So what then would those people invest in?
That's a good question. I don't know. It's a question worth exploring.
I also think it should, I think that question leads me to proposing a total breakdown and reconstruction of the old American dream.
Yeah.
I think the American dream of do your slave labor for the first 40 or 50 or 60 years of your life, and then hopefully you've saved up enough that once you're 60,
you can coast,
you can do what you want to do.
And not have your butt start scraping on the street at the end.
Like maybe instead people should be able to do what they want to do earlier in life, which means our financial structures should shift in such a way that citizens are supported. So
That's
universal income.
That's a discussion worth having.
This is the things that pop up in my head having come from a conservative capitalistic household. If nobody's paying for electricity and everybody's paying less for car insurance and everybody has free healthcare and free education and free national parks, where does the money come? It just has to be a whole new system. It just has to be, the whole system has to be a new system.
Well, I think this is a good time to have those discussions.
Like we were talking about
Thanks for tuning in.
Barter culture. Like a lot of wonderful barter culture stuff has turned up in the wake of the coronavirus.
Right.
But it can only go so far.
Right.
I can't.
There's a niche.
Yeah. I can't take my spare clothes down to the gas station and barter for bread and milk.
No.
Or barter for gas, because the guy working at the gas station is not the owner of the gas station. He's there to keep the gas station running so that it can make money for the person that owns the gas station.
Right.
And I don't have access to go to that guy and say, hey, can I give you my extra clothes so I can get gasoline because I don't have currency?
Right.
I really want to do more shows about currency. I want to talk about financial structures.
Fiat currency.
But where does the money?
How does banking work?
Could we have a universal income? Like, could we have a universal income?
It's possible.
And where does the money come from? And why can't we just get rid of having money altogether?
A credit system, some social credit system.
Yeah.
Well, again, I think these are the discussions I would like to have.
Yeah.
And explore further.
Every week there are things that we don't get to. We're at the end of our show, and I didn't get to go over Jamie's emails that she's been sending in about the shows, and I wanted to talk about.
We've got 8 minutes. You want to do an email?
Hashtag Yang Gang, Jay Hillegas. That's
right.
That's the universal income.
Well, yeah, and he was a bit universal basic income, so like $1,000 a month. That's not going to cover everybody's butt, but it would take the pressure off of a couple that's having to work and has kids, and extra $1,000 goes a long way. But yeah, I mean, our stimulus package is nowhere near what some of the other civilized countries are doing in terms of making sure that their people don't tear the country apart out of desperation because they're starving.
Right. Well, it's like, didn't one country even say, instead of making profits off of oil, we're just going to give the oil profits to the people? So
distribute that. Well, that's what they do in Alaska.
It's this concept that trickle down isn't actually real. It's actually float up.
Alaskan citizens get an oil dividend check every year for having oil taken out of their land.
What?
Yeah. that's something that could be done.
It's our planet.
And the oil guys are still, giving themselves billion-dollar bonuses, and still paying those dividends. So yeah, it's possible. If we're going to use an extractive economy where there's money to be had, it's possible.
Extractive, yeah. So in the in-between times, before we completely obliterate the need for fake currency, and just go to a holistic planetary culture where the means of production on the planet are supporting the civilians and inhabitants of the planet.
We're managing ourselves well.
There's a little transitionary period where there's still going to be currency. People will still need money to go buy groceries.
Yeah.
Instead of just universal food stamps, there will be a time where people still need money to go buy groceries.
Sure.
Where are they getting that money from?
Right.
Maybe it's not saying that nobody has to have a job that they hate, but that people do jobs that they love and actually get paid for them.
And also honoring jobs like people are suddenly very thankful for grocery store workers.
Yeah.
It's like honoring.
When are you gonna get a real job?
Honoring people who have jobs. Honoring people who do the job well, that want to do a job. I don't think we've fetishized sociopathic rich people. We've fetishized them in our culture for the last 30 years.
Fetishized upward mobility.
Yeah.
You should want to be doing something more.
Right. And so this is one of those situations where we need to change our values and value people who are doing the things that we don't want to. I've done jobs that I didn't want to, and I didn't mind doing it as a transitionary thing. As a 16-year-old, I'll go mow your lawn, whatever. You're an adult. You don't have time to go mow your lawn.
Right.
It's easy for you to throw me $10 and have me do the work. I'm happy to be that guy at that time.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of jobs where people are just happy to. There's you can find happiness and zen in any kind of occupation. So we have a tendency to devalue people who are doing things that are not glamorous, and I think it's been fun and nice to see a little of that shift in this situation.
Well, and we also, like you said, we glorify certain professions.
Yeah.
We glorify the idea of working, of being productive. That's something that a lot of people are
making more money than you can ever use.
A lot of people are stressing about is, who am I if I'm not being productive? If I'm not being productive, then where is my value? If I'm not doing a good job, what is my value? Do I have a value as a being on the planet if I'm just staying home and knitting and living off of my military check? Because some people can do that.
Yeah.
But we've been trained that we don't have value if we're not putting something into the system.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's a scarcity system, and if you're not putting something into the system, the whole trading your hours for currency is not always putting something into the system.
Yeah. A lot of
people are finding out their jobs are not that important right now.
Yeah. Your job isn't that important. You could actually be spending more time with your spouse and your kids.
Yeah.
If you didn't have, how many things do you do in life just because you have to have money?
Right.
How many things do you do because you have to have money?
Cat in the Cradle, baby.
What'd you say?
Cat in the Cradle.
What does that mean?
Oh, it's the old song, Cat in the Cradle and the Silver Spoon. It's about the dad who doesn't have time for his kid because he's always hustling.
Yeah.
And then he retires and he's like, geez, I really want to catch up with my kid. But he's like, I'd love to, Dad, but I got a kid and I'm really busy and I'm really hustling.
Yeah.
And the kid doesn't have time because he didn't really build the bond with the dad.
Yeah.
And it's a cycle of separation.
Cycle. How many things do you do because you just have to have money? And if you didn't, just ponder that this week. Ponder, if you didn't have to have money, what would you be doing instead? What would your life be like if you didn't have to have money?
Well, that's some people like.
I know people who would just host picnic lunches every day.
If you look at Billy Dog suddenly can't sit still for a while, has to run around and do things.
Yeah.
Humans are the same way. I think we need to find activities.
But do things that are meaningful to you, not just the next best thing you can grab so that you have money.
Agreed.
Like everybody's like, oh, self-checkers are taking jobs away from, and it's like, maybe somebody really does enjoy being a grocery checker.
Yeah.
But it would be great if people didn't have to have a job just to live.
That would be great.
You could just do things that are valuable to you. You could perform your function on the planet with the talents that were given to you when you were born.
Like when I was an idealistic young 20-something-year-old, my whole idea was like, wait a minute, I was born onto this planet like a bear. or a penguin.
Right.
I was just like pooped out on the planet.
Yeah.
And now I've got to go hustle some rent. Like, it's kind of a cruel trip. Like, the bear doesn't have to go hustle rent. He's got to go do the thing that he does.
He just needs to be alive.
He needs to go find some fish.
Walk through the woods.
Right. Like, and there's some challenges and whoopee. But like the idea, it hit me when I was in my 20s. I'm like, wait a minute. I've got to now be in this. I have to hustle to live. I have to do crap for other people that I don't like in order to stay out of the rain.
Yeah.
Like,
in order to have food.
It seemed a little crazy to me. Still does. I guess I just got used to it.
Yeah.
But it's hard for people to think of a world where you don't have to be enslaved to some abstract gig in order to
just be alive.
What's the thing? Like, earn your keep, right? You got to earn your keep.
There's enough on the planet. There is enough. There's already enough. It's just not being shared equally with all of the citizens.
Let's talk about currency next week, unless something really dynamic comes up in between.
Okay, sounds good.
We can deal with that. It's time for the top of the hour. It's time to move on in Radioland to the next radio program.
That's right.
And
thanks so much for tuning in today, guys. We really appreciate your guys' participation. It's a work in progress, and it gets better and better every week.
Yeah, thanks for participating in the dialogue here
and
with
sticking with us even through a live stream breakdown and the weird thing with that Swiss philosopher guy.
That's it. Thanks for tuning into your community radio station.
Yeah.
Now we can stop that stuff and say all the things.
That's the end.
We don't have a podcast yet still. We're still doing all the things.
Oh, gosh.
And now we're having to play catch up and edit these shows for the radio, and then find time to edit our radio shows for a podcast, starting with episode 1, which we haven't done yet.
So if you think about it, we have to listen to every show. So it takes about 3 hours to listen to each 2-hour show if I'm really booking it.
And editing and...
Yeah, so I have to listen to the whole thing, edit it, and then add the beginning and the ending.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we're working on that, and soon we'll have a library of things with searchable key terms.
Yes.
Like
tags.
Fiat currency.
Ooh. Thanks for tuning in, Jay. And Greg Hanley popped in at the end. He was watching Zulu Summer this afternoon.
Oh, jeez.
As a nice, relaxing, soothing thing to do in the pandemic time.
Yeah.
Thanks for listening in 710 and 805 and Green Dazed. I like the idea of all this going away with the thought of, like, what would I be doing? What would my function be if I weren't just didn't just have to make money to live? Like, maybe, what were you born to do? Like, think of all the songs and all the Disney movies of, like, all of the happy, what were you born to do? Like, were you born to be working that job? Is that why you were born? Like, you were created as an instance of life on the planet to do that job?
Great.
What are you supposed to be doing? And how do we make it so that more people can do what they're supposed to be doing? Grr.
The end.
Yeah.
Thanks for tuning in, folks.
Woo!
We'll be back we'll be back on Thursday.
Yeah, it's Sunday
The show
today.
will be chopped up, edited a little bit for the 2-hour conciseness of it, and will be aired live during the 4 to 6 hour on KBMF, as we'll be recording the next show to be recorded for Sundays.
We'll see you guys on Thursday at 4.
Yeah.
Thanks so much.
Thanks
we
for
appreciate
playing.
you guys. This is fun for us, and I hope it's fun for
Judy
you
Funk
guys.
just joined by too late.
Oh, Judy Funk,
We're
it's
out.
the end. I'm so sad.